Hi, I'm Rudy Winston with Canon USA. In this video, we're going to take a look at the intelligent viewfinder of the EOS 7D Mark II and show you some ways that you can actually utilize the tools in this viewfinder to speed up your shooting and making settings on the fly as you take pictures. This is an extremely comprehensive viewfinder display, but one of the cool things is that you can display in the picture area virtually as much or as little as you like. You're not obligated to show everything unless you want to. It's done with an LCD overlay above the focusing screen of the camera. Now, not all the information appears at the same time, even if you ask the camera to show the maximum amount of information in real-life picture taking. First off, let's talk about the AF point information. You can change the AF point display in the Finder in the 5th AF menu screen. Now, one of the things you can do is you can show all the focusing points, or you can show just the point that you're using. You can even turn the focusing points off completely and still use autofocus. Another new tool is the electronic level display in the viewfinder. The first time we've had a full-time display for a dual-axis viewfinder level in an EOS camera. There are grid lines that you can turn on and off, and then really new is the shooting information down at the bottom of the picture area. Now, the cool thing is you can turn these independently on or off in the second setup menu screen. The electronic level display at the top of the viewfinder is the first time we've had a full-time dual-axis display in the viewfinder. It can be left on all the time if you like, or as I say, independently turned off. Now, you also have horizontal and vertical grid lines that can be useful as well. You have two tools, therefore, in the viewfinder to help with your composition, not only if you're doing landscapes or architecture, but even in situations like portraits. These can make it very easy to be sure that you have accurate framing and straight horizon lines. Totally new is the shooting information display at the bottom of the viewfinder. You have similar items grouped together. For instance, your shooting modes are grouped together, your white balance icons, your drive mode icons, single frame, continuous, advanced, and so on. These are all clustered together. The one that is active will show up in the viewfinder. Now, they correspond mostly to buttons at the top of the camera. If you go to your multi-function button, which is the little button right by the shutter button here, if you go into your custom controls, one of the options is to turn that button into one that lets you cycle through the different settings on those top buttons. So what you can do is simply press the multi-function button with the camera at your eye, and then without having to do anything else, you can turn either the main dial on top of the camera or the quick control dial on the back of the camera and change those settings. So for instance, you can change a white balance setting. You can change a drive setting from single frame to continuous. You can change pretty much anything except an exposure mode by just pressing that button and then looking in the viewfinder at that information, and as you turn a dial, you see that information change. Another thing that makes this a truly full information viewfinder is that it now has a new vertical analog metering scale up and down the right-hand side of the viewfinder, similar to what we've had previously with the EOS 1D series cameras. Now, this is going to be used for several different things. It'll be used for manual metering. When you're working in automatic exposure, shutter priority, aperture priority program, if you dial in exposure compensation, that is also shown there, as well as with the traditional display we've had at the bottom of the viewfinder. And it also shows you flash exposure compensation if you're using any of the EX series speed lights. So when you're shooting flash, at a glance, you can see any compensation you've dialed in for flash, and simultaneously, you can see either the manual exposure level for ambient light, or if you're using an automatic exposure mode like aperture priority, you can see at a glance where you're at in terms of any exposure compensation that you've dialed in. And since flash compensation and ambient compensation in the Canon system are always totally independent of one another, you can see them in one place. For autofocusing points, consider using all the points, displaying them constantly, particularly if you like to change focusing points manually and move them quickly. Now, the one time that I find personally this may be a little confusing is if you use the large zone AF setting. If you use that AF area option, the border lines that define the wide zone are kind of thin, and sometimes all the focusing points being visible can compete with that a little bit. But other than with the large zone AF, I'm going to suggest that you consider displaying all 65 focusing points, even when you're only manually using one, especially if you like to move the points so it shows you where the different locations are going to be. Now finally, I want to touch on an optional accessory, and that's the optional focusing screen EHS, which is available for the 7D Mark II. Now at present, this is the only focusing screen optionally available for this camera. It is an S-type Canon screen, and it's important to understand what this screen is and what it isn't. This screen is not simply a, quote, bright screen. Instead, this is a screen that is designed exclusively for wide aperture lenses, f2.8 or faster, and what it does is it is going to throw out of focus areas even more visually out of focus in the viewfinder, so that particularly for manual focusing, when you are focused dead onto something, it'll contrast more with those areas that are just slightly out of focus than the standard screen would. So if you're a photographer that likes to work in available light and you like to work with wide aperture lenses, it could be something like the 50 1.4, the 85 1.8, any lens f2.8 or faster, the EHS screen is something you may want to consider, especially if you like to use manual focusing. In summary, the intelligent viewfinder in this camera gives you some really nice features to be able to not only see what you're shooting and compose skillfully, but also to be able to quickly change camera settings. It doesn't simply inform you of what your settings are, it's going to let you make changes quickly. And for those of you who do want or need a simplified viewfinder with little or no information showing in the picture area, the 7D Mark II allows you to do that too. Take advantage of some of these features, learn where some of these different settings are and how to apply them, and in different situations, you'll find you can really optimize the camera for the type of shooting that you like to do and the way you like to work.